They called it the Flying Milk Bottle. When the first of them appeared in the skies over Europe, the seasoned pilots of the German Luftwaffe could barely contain their laughter. Peering through their canopies, they saw not a sleek predator, not a nimble assassin of the air, but a fat, stubby, barrel-chested brute. It was an insult to the art of aerial combat, a clumsy, overweight caricature of a fighter plane. They sneered, they mocked, and they prepared to add another easy victory to their tally. They had no idea they were looking at their own executioner. They were laughing at the avalanche that was about to bury them. This is the story of how an underestimated, ridiculed machine became a symbol of unstoppable power. It is a testament to a different way of thinking, a story of how brute force, resilience, and an unshakable industrial will can overcome elegance and artistry. This is the story of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the juggernaut that broke the back of the German Air Force in the early 1940s. The prevailing wisdom in fighter design was clear. Speed, agility, and a high rate of climb were paramount. Fighters were thoroughbreds, designed for the delicate, deadly dance of the dogfight. They were fencers, relying on parries and thrusts, on lightning-fast maneuvers to gain a position of advantage. Then, from across the Atlantic, came the Thunderbolt. It was not a fencer. It was a battering ram. It was designed by Alexander Kartvelli, a man who saw the future of air combat not in graceful turns, but in overwhelming power. His philosophy was radical. K believed a pilot's best friend wasn't agility, but survivability and firepower. He designed an aircraft around the most powerful engine available. The massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, 2,000 horsepower beast that required a huge fuselage to house it and its complex turbo supercharger system. This system allowed the P-47 to maintain its incredible power at altitudes where other fighters gasped for air. Instead of a dancer, Kartvelli built a heavyweight boxer, a brawler that could climb to the stratosphere, choose its moment, and strike with unimaginable force. And its punch. 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing, capable of firing a torrent of over 100 rounds per second. It was a concentration of firepower that could tear a German fighter to shreds in a single, devastating burst. The P-47, or the Jug, as its pilots affectionately called it, was a declaration of a new kind of war, a war of attrition, a war of industrial might. The first encounters were a lesson in humility for the American pilots. They tried to fight the German way, to turn and burn with the nimble Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s. They were slaughtered. The Jug was heavy. It couldn't turn on a dime. It wallowed in low-altitude knife fights. Morale plummeted. The critics seemed right. This American behemoth was a failure. But then a new doctrine emerged, born of necessity and tailored to the unique strengths of their machine. It was called boom and zoom. American pilots learned to refuse the enemy's invitation to dance. Instead, they would use their superior altitude performance to climb far above the fight, to 16, 17, even 18,000 feet. From this perch, they would scan the skies below, masters of their domain. When a target was spotted, they would roll their massive fighter over, point its nose at the earth, and dive. And in a dive, the P-47 was untouchable. Its sheer mass, its 7 tons of steel and aluminum, turned potential energy into kinetic fury, which would plummet out of the sun like a thunderbolt, accelerating to speeds the lighter German planes could never hope to match. The German pilot would have only a moment's warning, a flash of silver. The terrifying shriek of air being torn apart before the sky around him erupted in a storm of 50 caliber slugs. The fight would be over in seconds. The Thunderbolt would then use its immense speed to pull out of the dive and climb back into the safety of the high altitude, ready to strike again. It was the tactic of a predator, not a duelist. It was brutal, efficient, and devastatingly effective. But it was the Jug's other quality that truly cemented its legend and shattered the morale of the Luftwaffe. its almost supernatural ability to absorb punishment. Stories began to filter back to airfields in England, stories that bordered on the unbelievable. Pilots would return in planes that looked more like Swiss cheese than flying machines. One pilot landed with over 200 bullets in cannon holes stitching his fuselage. Another flew home with 3 of his engine cylinders shot away, the massive radio engine still stubbornly chugging along. Wings were shredded, tails were mangled, canopies were shot out, yet the jugs kept coming home. They were built like flying tractors. The sheer mass that made them clumsy in a turn fight also made them incredibly robust. German pilots, accustomed to seeing their opponents disintegrate after a well-placed burst, were horrified. They would pour cannon shells into a P-47, see pieces fly off it, see it smoke and shudder, only to watch in disbelief as the American brute leveled its wings and stubbornly flew on. This incredible durability had a profound psychological effect. It meant that for every American pilot lost, many more returned, bringing with them the invaluable currency of combat experience. They learned, they adapted, they grew wiser and deadlier with every mission. The Luftwaffe, on the other hand, was bleeding pilots it could not replace. The Jug wasn't just winning battles, it was winning the war of experience, and the machine itself never stopped improving. American industry, a sleeping giant awakened, was not content to rest. Engineers worked tirelessly, refining the design. The introduction of a new paddle blade propeller was a game changer. It bit into the air with greater authority, dramatically improving the Thunderbolt's Achilles heel. Its climb rate scud suddenly. The lumbering giant could ascend with a new ferocity, closing the performance gap with its German rivals at lower altitudes. Water injection systems gave the engine emergency warpower, a surge of raw strength for critical moments. With each modification, the Jug became more lethal, more versatile. The mockery of the flying milk bottle had long since died on the lips of German pilots. It had been replaced by a new name, spoken with a mixture of hatred and awe, the Teufelskrug, the Devil's Jug, as Allied forces prepared to storm the beaches of Normandy. The P-47 underwent its final, fearsome evolution. While it had been born as a high-altitude escort fighter, its strength and stability made it a perfect platform for ground attack. It became the Jabot, the jagged bomber. Loaded with 500-pound bombs under its belly and high-velocity rockets under its wings, the Thunderbolt became the terror of the German army. Squadrons of P-47s would sweep low over the French countryside, a roaring, man-made storm. They hunted trains, blowing them off their tracks and severing critical supply lines. They descended upon armored columns, their rockets and bombs turning tanks into burning pyres. They strafed airfields, supply depots, and troop concentrations, their 8 machine guns chewing through steel and flesh with equal indifference. For the German soldier on the ground, the sound of the Jug's radial engine was the sound of impending doom. It was a relentless, terrifying presence that denied them movement, supplies, and hope. The P-47 was no longer just fighting for control of the sky. It was systematically dismantling the German war machine from the ground up. The success of the Thunderbolt was the ultimate expression of the American war effort. Germany could produce magnificent aircraft flown by some of the most skilled and courageous pilots the world had ever seen. But they could not match the sheer, overwhelming scale of American production. For every Focke-Wulf that rolled off a German assembly line, a dozen Thunderbolts rolled out of factories in Farmingdale and Evansville. When a German ace was shot down, a vital, irreplaceable part of the war machine was lost. When an American pilot was lost, a highly trained replacement was already on a ship, crossing the Atlantic, ready to fly one of the thousands of spare aircraft waiting for him. It was an avalanche of steel, a tsunami of industrial power that the Third Reich simply could not withstand. The P-47 was the tip of that spear, a weapon that perfectly embodied the philosophy of overwhelming force. Even the advent of the world's first operational jet fighter, The Messerschmitt Me-262 could not turn the tide. On paper, the German jet was untouchable, hundreds of miles per hour faster than any propeller-driven plane. IKEA, the veteran P-47 pilots, found its weaknesses. They learned that the jets were vulnerable during their long takeoff runs and their slow landing approaches. They would orbit German airfields, waiting patiently, and then dive on the jets when they were at their most helpless. In the air, if a jet made the mistake of engaging in a turning fight, the P-47 could often outmaneuver it. And in a dive, the Thunderbolt was still king. More than one arrogant jet pilot was shocked to find a P-47 keeping pace with him in a high-speed dive, its 8 guns spitting fire. The future had arrived, but the rugged, piston-engined warrior of the present was not yet ready to yield the sky. After the war, the truth of the P-47's impact became clear from the testimony of those it had defeated. The great German air commander, General Klaus Richter, a man who had led the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, spoke with a grim sense of respect for the machine his men had once mocked. He confessed that they had completely underestimated it. They had looked at its bulky frame and seen weakness, failing to understand its true purpose. "We saw a clumsy fighter," he would later write, "but we failed to see a weapon of attrition. It was not designed to outdance us. It was designed to outlast us. It absorbed our blows and kept fighting. It fell from the sky in numbers, but it was replaced in even greater numbers." The P-47 Thunderbolt, more than any other aircraft, was the instrument that buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of American production. The story of the flying milk bottle is more than just the history of an airplane. It is an inspirational lesson in the nature of true strength. It teaches us that what appears to be a weakness can, from a different perspective, be a profound advantage. It reminds us that resilience, the ability to take a punch and keep moving forward, is often more important than initial grace or flair. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a testament to the idea that when a nation unites its will, its ingenuity, and its immense power towards a single purpose, it can create a force that is not just unstoppable, but inevitable. It was laughed at, then it was feared, and in the end, it was victorious, a rugged, roaring symbol of a power that simply would not be denied.